I'm just going to briefly introduce our speakers. So Jessica Halem.
Yep, sure, great.
Halem, MBA, who is going to be our moderator, is the inaugural LGBTQ Outreach and Engagement Director at Harvard Medical School. In 2018, she secured a major grant to integrate sexual and gender minority health equity into medical school curricula. Prior to joining Harvard, Jessica ran the Lesbian Community Cancer Project in Chicago, where she implemented the nation's first cultural competency trainings for the CDC and served on then candidate Obama first LGBT advisory committee. Jessica has published on informed consent and transgender health, optimism and organizational change, and mentoring across difference. Robin Reister, MD, also a special place in my heart, is the program director of the primary care track of the Dell Med Internal Medicine Residency Program. Her clinical site is the Austin VA, where she promotes advocacy and reducing barriers for LGBTQIA veterans. Prior to coming to Dell, she was a clinician educator at Mount Sinai. In all of her clinical roles, she has cared for LGBTQIA+ populations and has years of experience in PrEP, HIV, and gender-affirming care. She also has years of experience in the evaluation of survivors of torture that are seeking asylum in the United States, was the founder of the Beth Israel Mount Sinai Internal Medicine Resident Human Rights Program. Many of these evaluations focus on asylum based on being a member of a particular social group, and Dr. Reister has experience in evaluations based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Dr. Chase T.M. Anderson is currently a child psychiatry fellow at the University of California at San Francisco, and recently graduated from adult psychiatry residency at the Massachusetts General Hospital and McLean Hospital. He completed his undergraduate education in chemistry at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and his master's in biological engineering at MIT as well, and is a graduate of the Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine. In his free time, he enjoys going for long walks, listening to K-pop, reading fantasy books, playing soccer, me too, writing, and planning dinners with friends. All excellent endeavors. And Dr. Salazar, who may be joining us later, I'll just briefly introduce him in case he's able to join. Rene Salazar, MD, is the inaugural Assistant Dean for Diversity and Professor of Medical Education and Internal Medicine at the University of Texas at Austin Dell Medical School. In this role, Dr. Salazar leads a team responsible for developing programs to increase the recruitment and retention of individuals from groups traditionally underrepresented in medicine. He is a graduate of the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio School of Medicine and completed his internship and residency in internal medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. After residency, Dr. Salazar completed a one-year Latino Health Disparities Research Fellowship and was a faculty member in the Division of General Internal Medicine at UCSF from 2003 until June 2016. Dr. Salazar has presented his work at national meetings, including the AAMC, SGIM, and SHN. His work has also been featured on NPR, All Things Considered, and he is the recipient of many awards, including the 2015 Minority Access National Role Model Award. So as you can see, we have a really distinguished panel, and I am going to hand it over to you, Jessica, to start the conversation.
Oh gosh, thank you so much. Obviously, Dean Salazar is an incredible person, which we will give him a lot of slack for either having to miss this or, but we're thankful for his work. And I listening to his bio just really reminds me about what great stuff is going on at Dell. And I'm so sad to not be there in person. And maybe one of these days we will. I wanted to start off, been thinking about Texas and a dear, incredible activist in Houston, Texas. I just wanted to start off today's talk, and I think it lends itself beautifully, and she would appreciate this. Monica Roberts was an incredible activist in Houston, Texas, who died yesterday, and she's really one of the country's most well-known, well-respected Black trans women. She would have introduced herself as a big Black trans woman, and we all owe her a lot. And I think in honor of Monica, I just wanted to sort of start off this hour that we have together by being brave and bold. Hello, Dean Salazar. Welcome, welcome. you know, just in honor of Monica and the incredible activism of and in honor of Black trans women who have come before us, it behooves us to be brave. It behooves us to be bold, to make a difference. We only have a little bit of time together today, but let's make the best use of it. In Monica's name, we do this work, I think. While we don't necessarily have a huge amount of a trans identity on this panel, what we do have are people I know committed to changing medicine, medical education, the profession, the career, patient care, thinking about the role of medicine in our communities, and thinking about those who are left out right now and most marginalized. I know that's what we all have in common. But for me, what is one of the greatest tools for changing medicine? I mean, there's many tools. You've heard all of our bios. We're publishing, right? This is academic medicine. This is a group of people publishing. We use evidence. We're doing bench research. We're doing qualitative, quantitative research. We're getting the best clinical care models and protocols. We're activists and advocates. But this is a panel about, I think, one of the most powerful interventions that can be made in medicine on behalf of those who need it most, and that's our own queer professional success, right? That is our career success in medicine with all of our identities. Front and center, centered and aligned, clear and settled, however we sort of choose to define it or say it or share it, but really to have that internal and external congruence, right? That alignment for who we are and how we want to make a difference in this profession. And for the trainees and for the students who are joining us, I know that this can feel very, it can feel pretty intense to think about this conversation. And so we wanted to dive right in and really talk about using our own stories of navigating academic medicine and talk about the highs, the lows, the lessons learned, the hopes and dreams, you know, the sort of what are some positives and what are some lessons, some challenges, and how can we together help each other do better. So what I'm going to ask each of our panelists to do in light of being brave and bold and quick is to tell your story in this way. What I want to hear from you and what I want you to share with us is, we got your bios. We're gonna go down the rabbit hole of PubMed. All of you are amazing. I want to know what I can't find on the internet. I want to know about what the kind of conversations that you don't share when you're invited to give the fancy keynotes, right? I want to hear the story of how your personal identities, multiples, have intersected with your career success in both positive and challenging ways. And so for some of you, it might be, here's a conversation that I had with a mentor early on. Here's where I was out. Here's where I was an activist. Here's where it was difficult. Here's where I am today thinking about that. I might ask Dr. Anderson to go first, only because I know he's probably ready to tell the story, and that will give our other talks, our other speakers a little bit more time. Dr. Anderson, share.
All right, and everybody can call me Chase, so totally fine with that. Thank you for that question. It's really a good one. I think no matter where you look online, anything you find about me, you won't find that I identify as a dreamer, and not like a dreamer in the way that you typically think, but much more of, I see the potential in everybody. I see the potential in our society to be better. That is what I'm trying to foster, and what I always try to do is, what is the best part of yourself that might not be seen or validated, and how do we bring that forth? That comes from being at MIT, actually. I got to live in a different world. It's very Star Trek future of like, let's all get along, let's be friends. All of us have gone through things, and how do we build a better society so other people don't have to go through those things? I write a lot about LGBT health and underrepresented minority health. but those are not the things that I write about them because I know it helps other people and it helps myself when I write them. But what I would really love to do is write fantasy novels and take us into that beyond future that I think we can all reach. I think a lot of us are doing the things to help other people who are queer, who are LGBT, who are underrepresented minorities right now, but I want to see what would society be like if we didn't have to focus on those things all the time. What could really be freeing ourselves up to do? So what I've started doing in my own writing is bringing in little elements of fantasy, because that's what I really care about. So that's what you won't see, is that I think about that idealistic future because I think we can get there. And that's what I think a lot of us are striving for. We just have a lot of roadblocks right now, but that's what I hope for, is that like all of you know that your dreams are important and that you're important.
That's what a wonderful goal. I love this. Dean Salazar, I'd love to hear from you. We're a big fan from afar.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for having me. And hopefully folks can hear me okay. I've been having some audio issues. Please flag me out if you can. But I, and in fact, was giving another talk just this morning that I'm coming from. So I'm on the talking spirit. But I think, my goodness, there's a whole bunch of ways to answer this question. And I think for me, you know, the things that you won't see in my bios or hear about, you know, without really getting to them, I think it's my own story of how I got to this point, right? And how I, you know, personally, when I made the decision to come out to family and friends, and just how incredibly personal it was along this path on my way to becoming a physician and now an administrator back here in Texas at Dell Med. And I think, and I recognize that because having come from, you know, trained in San Antonio for medical school and going to UCSF, where I spent 17 years, being in two very different environments, two very different environments in terms of the support that came with being in San Francisco, I think, you know, I realized just how important that was to me in terms of my own confidence, my own personal confidence in coming out. All right, having grown up in South Texas, I'm Mexican-American, first-gen college student, very traditional family, and it was, you know, I think a lot of us will resonate with let's just say the differences and the difficulties in coming out to family. And for me, you know, actually early on in medical school, I was only out to 5 friends. I came out the summer before I started to family. And, you know, in medical school, I had a very close friends that I was out to. And it wasn't until I got into San Francisco and UCSF for residency that I really felt like I could truly be the person that I am, right? And I think that's really where I got to the point where I'm like, I really don't care what anybody thinks at this point. And so, you know, it really just helped me become more comfortable and more confident professionally. And then I began to realize just how valuable this part, this is who I am, right? This is one identity of many that I embrace, and I embrace tightly. Fast forward, 17 years later, when I made the trip back to Texas in 2016, never thought that the journey would continue in many ways. And so the one thing that I'll share with folks, which was an unfortunate experience, but one that's very real, was I was fired by a patient just over a year ago for being gay here in Austin. Right, so then to go back to that and to then quickly remember what it's like to be pushed back in that closet and what it felt like, I think, you know, it certainly is still something I'm still processing. But I share that with folks because I think, despite thinking that we're in a place where we've made so much progress, I think we can all realize how much more we have to do in order to make this place a place that embraces everybody. And by this place, I mean this country and this moment that we're living in with such incredible turmoil and unrest and uncertainty. And so I think for me, what I realized was that I have an incredible number of colleagues who have been supportive and helped me kind of continue to navigate this path. So I guess the short message in that very long response is that it's a path that I'm still navigating, but I've also realized that there are some incredible allies and friends that have made me, that have been so invaluable in my own experience as I navigate this professionally and personally. And it's been just wonderful to have friends who I can count on, who I can lean on, who truly understand the experience and who will support me as much as I need, which has been really great.
Powerful stories, Dean Salazar. Thank you. What a gift it is to have you here. Dr. Reister, tell us, share with us a little bit.
I was thinking there's so many different things I could talk about. But first off, Chase, I'm so glad you mentioned Star Trek because I grew up on Star Trek, and I realized I have this picture right behind me of me at a Star Trek convention last summer, and I think that helped shape my idealistic version of what the world could be as well. But just had to put that out there. But I think I'm glad you asked this question. I was thinking yesterday about what I wanted to talk about, and yes, Trekkies. Okay, there's more. There were so many queer people at the Star Trek convention. You guys should go.
Just about to say, the intersection of gay and STEM career and Star Trek. It's a strong Venn diagram, everyone.
It's huge. There was a big party called Gays in Space on the last night. It was awesome. But I was thinking about what I wanted to say, because I feel like sometimes I'm like, like being queer, it hasn't been that bad for me. So many people have to deal with so much discrimination. But on the flip side, I don't want to say that it's easy, because being queer, there's just so many things that come up. Like, am I going to come out on a job interview? Do I need to, if I'm being friendly with my patients, can I reveal my personal life? And there are these things you have to navigate all the time. So I think, just in answer to the question, just how things, positives and negatives throughout my career, I think I would say, like Dr. Salazar, I think in med school, I was out to my friends. Aliza is one of my best friends from med school, but I don't think I was going around advertising things. I think med school, there was a real mix. We went to med school in San Antonio of conservative people and liberal people, and in the middle. But it's interesting, as I moved on to residency, and so far the world, or our country, has also been progressing along with my career progression. So I part of me isn't sure if I've become more comfortable and more instantly out, or just if that's me personally, or just like the whole world has been more accepting and I have less fear because of that. I would say that I really wish that I had had more mentors in medical school, or in residency. I did my residency in New York City, so there were lots of queer people around, but we didn't really talk about what it was like to be queer in academia. And so I'd say positives and negatives. Negatives, just like having to navigate that. And then now that I'm one of the only queer representation in our leadership of the residency program, kind of having to feel like I'm that person to have to point things out and make sure we're using the right language. I guess that's a good and a bad thing. But I do say now that a positive is that I take pride in my identity, and I feel like I can help encourage this type of diversity in our program and in our recruitment, and hopefully make our residents and med students feel more comfortable that they could maybe have a mentor to talk to. All right, I think I got out a lot of what I wanted to say.
No, I love this. I'm struck by a theme throughout all of your stories, which is about having experienced a really positive culture and climate, that it wasn't a forever. I have been forever in the perfect culture and climate. But what I hear is that you had a minute of it, a couple of years of it, where you experienced this really sort of a utopia, wonderful, we would say a great culture and climate. And then knowing your careers, how you've brought it back. And so I'm struck by now thinking about now that you know what you didn't know then, and thinking about the young people on this who might be thinking, oh crap, does this mean I need to go spend time in New York or San Francisco and come back a big, bold gay? So that can't always be the answer, as residency directors of San Francisco and New York and Boston will attest. But so now that you know what it should be like, now that because I have to admit, Robin, part of what I hear in you saying, it hasn't been that bad. I hate to say that. What in my work with LGBTQ physicians is that you don't even know what you don't know. that there's a lot that we sort of stuff down or ignore, or we haven't even let ourselves think about, because you've just got to keep your head down and keep going. It's that kind of a profession. And I think all of if there's other science people on here, that's my impression, is like, there's a little bit of like, you keep your head down, and then as soon as you look up, you're like, ah. Okay, so all of you, think back to that. You know what the culture and climate should be like, right? Chase is thinking about the future. Dean Salazar's been in San Francisco, where we all really want to be, you know, truth be told, right? Robin's been in New York City, right? So now that you know what it's like, how can we bring that back to Texas, right? What are those parts that we could bottle up? And maybe Dean Salazar, you're already doing some of those, could share it with us.
Yeah. So I think, so one of the things that I think is incredibly important, and I even discovered this on my own journey back to Texas, was, what a tremendous asset it is to be who we are, right? And I think, it's so incredibly important as we, really think about diversity and this element of it, and particularly when it comes to patients, right? So what was unbeknownst to me was that Austin actually has one of the largest communities in the country, right? When you look at it per capita. And so that was so off my radar. And so when I got back, there was a large number of folks here who are trying to find a provider who is openly out and identifies as, part of the community or a strong supporter of the community. So I think, and I think we can all relate on some level when it comes to trying to find a provider who is either part of the community or friendly and an ally, whatever that means, right? I think that's the part that I love and I embrace the hell out of now, right? So, being able to come to that space, and so as a primary care physician, I'm now creating a space in my clinic for the community, for folks who are part of this community, who are trying to find somebody who can connect with them, right? And I want to be careful that we don't assume that just because I'm a gay man, that this becomes an issue with identity and differences, where we just automatically assume that just because you're part of that group, that you're going to get what that group needs, right? So that's also a dangerous and slippery slope, because we all have our own biases. And having just come out of this last talk that I gave on implicit bias, I have to remind myself of my own implicit biases towards my own community. And so I think it's just a matter of acknowledging that, but just being able to connect with folks on levels that perhaps others don't understand is incredibly important. So I think, it's an incredibly personal decision to come out, whether it be on a residency application, med school application, or, there are lots of things to consider, but the more that we're beginning to realize just how underserved our is, the more I encourage folks to think about who it is, who we are, and how we can truly serve folks in a way by shared experiences that can make a huge difference in their experience and their satisfaction. So I really want folks to think about that and embrace that.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because, in this work especially, hi, thank you, Rachel, for your, thank you. Thank you to the interpreter, I think, who just took a break. I love that you said that, because I know, thinking about the story you told about the patient who fired you, for those of us who have worked in med ed, the straight people, the first thing they would say to me when we talk about out students, they'd say, the scenario is always, what about if the patient has a problem with the fact that you're gay, or the patient doesn't like you because you're Black. And of course, I'm always pushing us to reframe that about how many patients will be better served by us being out. And so I love that you automatically reframed that for all of the losses. How many are the gains, right? And really, what are we losing when we aren't out? Who have we left behind by not bringing our whole selves? I know other doctors, please chime in now. I'd love to. What does that look like? Here we're talking about the utopia. Now that you know what the culture and climate should be like, what should we be doing?
Yeah, I can go. I think the way I think about it is, so got to live at MIT, and like being Black and gay, like friends were like, these are the most beautiful parts of you. This is like what helps us. This is what helps everybody around you. This is what helps you. So I got to really fly. Like, I think you all know, like panelists, that I like call myself a unicorn phoenix, and that came about because of friends there, because like continually rising from the ashes of my previous self. And I lost that during med school when classmates said I won class president because I was Black and gay, that I got in because I was gay, just some really unpleasant things. And for me, it was honestly never the patients. The patients were always like, hey, like, you're a Black gay doctor, but you're a doctor, you're a person, and you are treating me like a person. And that is something I haven't seen yet. So being Black and gay taught me a lot of empathy to be there with patients in their darkest moments. It was usually staff and other classmates who had issues, and that's when that came forth. So going into residency, there were things that happened there too, like me not wearing a tie became a secret meetings and things like that. And like Jessica knows that this was a whole saga. But the thing I realized near the end was we get one shot at this. We get one shot to be ourselves. So why not take what I had learned from MIT and be myself? I think Jessica knows I only started writing in May of this year, and like, I have felt freer than I ever have, and I haven't felt this free in 7 years. So why not be yourself? There will be people who it doesn't resonate with them, but that's not your problem right now. I always find that to be actually rich fodder for conversation. And I'm coming at this as a psychiatrist, so that's why I probably think that way. But I think whenever somebody has an issue, it's very rarely a patient, it's staff members. And so then what I get to do is say, you know, what kind of biases are coming up for you right now? That's very interesting that you brought that up. Let's explore that a little bit more. Some people, their defenses go up immediately, but overall, me being myself has actually led to more beautiful things than I think would have happened if I had hidden who I was. So like, you see me, I show up with my hair and like how I act, and like just being yourself helps other people be themselves too.
It's funny, we're thinking about the tie battle of Chase Anderson. I was thinking about that today because, 9 months of COVID hair, I have the worst hair. I mean, I usually have very good Zoom hair and professional, and this is not how I usually, and I just thought this all has to be, I'm so thankful that perhaps we can put all this, we've been having these conversations online about queering professionalism. And I hope during this COVID time, we could all really start to rethink, what does this professionalism in this field really look like? Robin?
Yeah, well, just I totally love the sentiments of Chase and Rene about being bold, and also finding the community, like Chase was saying. When I was in New York, outside of my doctor friends, I found this community of other queer women, and it was my first time to have a group of friends like that, and it was just really important and really great. And now we moved to Austin about 1.5 years ago, and I've really sought out other queer women in my friend circle. And it's been really different. It's been a really different way to experience being back in Texas. And I think, I don't say we need to only be around people like us, but I think having a queer community around you is really important and really, just really helpful to remember that you are normal and maybe you're the only type of that normal at your program, but you are normal. These are normal ways to be. And I say one thing I try to do in my position is I just try to put in queer stuff everywhere, everything I do. Like we were just doing, I helped make the academic half day, and we were doing some about infectious diseases, not non-STIs, but I threw in some cases with queer patients and just kind of putting it in everywhere. To try to also just normalize that, because I think the type of patients I saw in New York is different than where I am now, which is at the VA in Austin, which is like all veterans from the surrounding area of Austin. I will also say, in my personal experience, I think I have gotten more crap, I'll just say, from patients than colleagues, especially now that I'm at the VA where the majority of my patients are men and a lot of older men. I've had a lot of just like, what's your husband do? What's your husband do? You married? What's your husband do? And it's often Really uncomfortable, because a lot of these patients are very conservative. They'll, they talk about who they want to vote for president, even though I'm not allowed to talk back, which you can't do. And to be honest, and I'm kind of embarrassed, I don't always correct them. Sometimes I just don't answer the question and kind of move on. I had this one patient that is like, "What's your husband do?" And then he was already driving me crazy, so I didn't feel like going along with anything. So I was just like, I was like, "Or what, your wife?" "Well, I don't care. I knew gay people in the military and I didn't turn them in." And I was like, oh my God. Won an award of a Nobel Peace Prize for not turning people in. So I haven't quite figured out how to deal with it, because I know sometimes it's just not worth it to out yourself to your patients. What an ally. I know. He was already screaming at me about how much he hated the VA and some of those patients. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but that's something I still struggle with. I'd actually love to hear.
Yeah, that's a great segue. And I just want to take a second real quick. Rachel, to the interpreter, I've gotten a request. Could you switch to ASL as your language? Okay, ASL. Okay, great. I have to admit, I don't know what the other one is, but
yeah, neither do I.
I'm fascinated. It's a Texas version. No, I'm just.
I thought you were serious. Like, really? Oh my goodness. What? About the y'alls and yeah.
We all should be learning. Yeah, ASL is a wonderful language to learn. I think that's a great segue, and I do want to, since in this moment, remind our folks on the chat, please let me know some questions, chime in, feel free, turn on your camera, turn on your mic, whatever you're comfortable with. But that's a good segue, Robin, into really the most common question that I have worked with current medical students and residents, which is that bedside moment. Navigating those bedside moments. It comes up a lot. And I know on multiple levels, right? It's one of those, I'm pretty sure that's what you spend 50% of your training on. So let's dive in. Maybe panelists or other people maybe there are students here who have had something that just happened to them. Panelists or others, dive in. How have you navigated these bedside moments, especially thinking about yourself still in the role of a trainee or a student, which is where I feel like this conversation needs to hinge, because of that sort of added layer of how the attending will, how the attending will interpret it, as well as the patient. That's that sort of Venn diagram of anxiety I think a lot of students have. Chase, please.
All right, so I will give two examples. I think this is one of the things we need to take a step back and talk about a little bit, is all of us as panelists, we're sitting before you and we seem like we make it work in some ways because we've gotten here. It was really hard. So I just want to tell you guys and normalize, I went through depression. I went through suicidal ideation and things like that. I was on meds for a while. This stuff happens and it can be really hard. And so we're sitting here now and things seem great, but that doesn't mitigate that there were struggles along the way and that we're still trying to figure this stuff out. So just wanted to normalize that for all of you as well. The first example is, so again, this is context dependent. We had a patient who had mania, which means elevated mood and was irritable and angry and had ripped doors off hinges and things like that. And was also using racial slurs and homophobic slurs. So this was when I was at McLean. Showed up with security and the patient was starting to say certain slurs. And one of the things he said to me was, "Oh, you obviously didn't get you didn't get enough dick last night," or as a bottom. And then I had security there. So I very irreverently was "Oh no, I'm only a top right now." And so it stopped him for a second. It made him actually pause and take a step back. And the security, it was a moment of levity and irreverence. So I was able to use humor in that moment. Again, context dependent. The other situation I'll use is actually taking care of a patient who actually was saying the N-word. And that was something I hadn't really seen as much as a resident trainee. And so when it happened, I actually stopped rounds and I said that this is not appropriate. This is not something that we're going to have happen right now. We are respecting you as a patient. You need to respect us. And then my attending actually backed me up and stopped rounds too after to reiterate that, and then checked on me later. That doesn't always happen, but in that moment, what I was thinking about was we had medical students there. And so it's not necessarily about changing the behavior of the patient, it's protecting the other people around you and modeling the behavior that should be expected. So I think as a trainee, what I always appreciated was when an attending would actually stop a person when they were doing that behavior. And that is our role as like older people to look out for you guys a little bit more, because you guys are in a position of what I call hierarchical vulnerability, where it's hard to speak up and it's hard to know what to say. But those two situations, like you can use humor, you can use irreverence, you can also set a limit, because this is about modeling behavior and setting boundaries for yourself and for other people. The other thing I always do is, I wish I didn't have to, but I actually have a Rolodex of responses in my head for when somebody says something. Like, I'm like, oh, somebody says the N-word. I have like these 10 different things I can go down. And it just, you practice it and you make it so like it's something that you have ready and on hand and on tap at all times. So those are like some of the situations I would give as examples. And then also like have your responses ready of like how to set that limit for yourself and for the team.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love practicing ahead of time. I mean, it sort of gets to thinking about Robin's moment. You know, I just want to sort of affirm all of us, especially for women who might pass as straight and, you know, have sort of look that way. It happens all the time, right? Especially if you work around men, and it's totally okay. I do it. I'm on airplane, you know, when I was once on an airplane, and, you know, it's like, do I need to come out to the guy next to me on the 3-hour flight? Sometimes I pretend like I'm a spy. And when I don't come out in those moments, I pretend like I'm spying on heterosexuals just to see what it's like, because the conversation really changes when you come out. Right now, you've got to talk about, do you know Ellen DeGeneres and stupid things like that. So I love it. I love the idea of being a spy. And I've said that to students of color before who aren't feeling those moments of being able to stand up in the moment. And I sort of, identifying as a spy, write it down, keep track of it. We can talk about it later. So I just want to affirm, you do not need to come out all the time at all. Super queer spy, Jessica. We've got a question here about how panelists, okay. Great. Okay, this is a great question, right? So this is a great question. So this is about thinking about your med school applications, residency applications, or applying for your job. How did you, or have you seen people, or how would you recommend, what are some examples of talking about your identities in a way, and I'll sort of add to this, I think that makes sense. That doesn't feel like you're sort of plopping it down. It doesn't feel like you're forcing it as your challenge question that you've overcome. What's a way that you've talked about your identities in these applications, or not? How do you sort of imagine it today? Anyone, please, I'll open it up.
I feel like I've been going first, so Robin, I know you just unmuted. I'm gonna let you go first. No, you go first.
Well, I'll say that it's gotten easier since I've done a lot of work with LGBTQIA plus communities. I put that all over my CV about my clinical work and my work with asylum seekers. And that's it. And I review, part of my job is I review applications to our residency program. And it's kind of like these like winks, like I feel it that way. Like I notice a lot of med students will put a lot about the work they've done with that community. And that's kind of how I feel. And then I know that in the interview days, I always, and actually this feels like kind of cheating since I'm married, I can say my wife, blah, blah, blah. I think if when I was single, it was a lot harder to come out because it was harder to bring it up. But I try to just like really quickly be like, my wife does this, and so that I know people can talk about it. But so when you're in med school or applying to med school, I think That's a little bit harder to put in those hints, but I have heard some advice of like when you're on an interview asking like, what's the queer community like in Austin, or what's the queer community like in this city, or as a queer individual, or as a queer med student, I'm curious what it's like for queer faculty here. So, but I'll let Renee take it over if there's any other advice of where to put it on an application.
Yeah, so I think, it's really, obviously, it's an incredibly personal decision, how folks decide whether or not they will come out in a personal statement. And I think, again, now that we're in a space in medicine where people finally understand that this truly is an underserved community and that there's so much you bring to the experience just by who you are. I think number one, if programs have an issue with it, that's probably a program you don't want to be at. And I think it's certainly going to be a challenging several years. I also want to recognize that there are some specialties perhaps that may not be as willing to open their arms as others. Again, I want to be very careful because we're seeing a lot of shift in all of this across the board, particularly as more and more of us are in positions of leadership. And so my shameless plug for the folks around here who are in the role of a student or a trainee is, thinking about careers in academia, because we need more folks like us sitting in these seats, right, making these decisions, supporting each other. I mean, reviewing these applications. I was on the selection committee at UCSF for the categorical medicine program and primary care program for 12 years and have wrote a lot of personal statements, have reviewed a lot of files. And I think, the way folks are thinking about this, as they should, is that it's truly a story about resilience, right? So it's a story about being able to overcome obstacles along the way that I think have prepared us for the work that we're going to do, right? I think it creates physicians who are truly able to handle quite a bit, in my opinion, who can sort of navigate barriers and obstacles and dodge those bullets and, and keep moving forward with our heads high and the ability to do things in a way that makes a huge difference. So again, I think it's, all that being said, there's still a lot of folks here in Texas, here at Dell, who are out to a very small group and not out professionally. And so, and I respect that. But I think it's, my advice to folks is that I was on a panel years ago for fourth-year students who were in the process of applying, we were trying to think about this. And I think, the shift in where we are is again, it's something that I think people should embrace if they're comfortable in that application statement and into that program. And so it's, and I'm seeing a lot more of that in the personal statements I read. I was working with one of our fourth years. I'm trying to see if he's on the list here, and he's not in the program today, but wrote perhaps one of the most beautifully written personal statements I've read in 17 years. Right? And I've read a lot of them, and there are about 5 that stand out, and his is one of the 5. And it's this powerful story of his experience, and it was done in a way that beautifully kind of balanced the, sometimes, revelations can be quite a bit and can sometimes be, it's something you want to, it's a very fine line you want to walk. And he beautifully sort of wove in a story of his own experience, but why that experience has created or has made him perhaps the best physician student I've ever worked with, right? So again, I think there are things and ways to think about it. And so ultimately it's about people's comfort level, where they are, where you're applying to. That's the other part, right? Thinking about different programs, it's different applying to the West or the Northeast as opposed to perhaps pockets of the country. Again, we're seeing more and more change, but I'll be frank, I never thought in a million years, Austin, Texas, like, wow, of course we're Texas, I got it, but we're also Austin, big blue dot, bowl of tomato soup. So, but we're in Texas. And so I think that's the issue here, right? Is that there's still people around me. I mean, I'm in East Central, but you just go 15 miles any one direction and you hit a very different world. So you've got to be mindful of that. And I think I love the questions Robin brought up is, asking, what's the community like? Who's there? Who are faculty? Because you also want to try to find folks that support you. Now, you may not find a lot of folks. So I think this is where the power of these experiences, this larger community comes in handy. So I certainly want to encourage you to think about, create your mentorship team. I've got one with folks across the country that's made a huge difference in my success.
Oh, that you're Dean Salazar, you are music to my ears. I have to say, for those folks on this call who haven't been a part of, you might not be a part of Gay Med Twitter, that Chase is the queen of Gay Med Twitter. What is so exciting and what has changed dramatically, I joined, I started at Harvard Medical School 6 years ago, that job I had for 6 years. Still, when the only position like it as a full-time paid person to advocate on behalf of LGBTQ students and staff and faculty. a dramatically different day. What I would have said 6 years ago is like, yep, we got to find the schools and you'll find your mentors there. And today it is about being a part. We are a national movement. We're an international movement, but you will have mentors. You can put together your mentor circle from all over. And it can be a little bit about the specialties that you're interested in. It can be about identity. It can be about other parts of your background. And then you create this whole sort of hub and spoke model. I love to think about it, right? You're the middle of this wheel. And then you've just got all these spokes that will be your network, and it doesn't have to be in the school. So if you are at a school where you can't see the community and you've only got a couple of you and you've only got 1 or 2 faculty, you can supplement it really with this incredible national movement. So maybe I will make Chase go on, say a little bit more about, you know, I do like to end on sort of this thing of hope. Yep, there he is. You know, talk to us about this network and what you've seen grow about this queering professionals and what this world of LGBTQ medicine really looks like.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And also, yeah, like everybody should be on Twitter. I think it's a validating environment. Like there are obviously pockets of like avoid that, but like overall, I think what I've seen is especially like Black med Twitter has become a thing as well as gay med Twitter. And so it's a place for people to actually have their voices heard finally, because I think too often people feel silenced and then they start to silence themselves. And so when Twitter, Jessica knows this, back in the day when I first started my Twitter, I was actually under like a different name. I used a pseudonym because I was like, oh, I can pop off about all this stupid shit that's happening. Oh, are we allowed to? Okay, I don't care. All the stupid stuff that's happening at like in residency and all this racism and all this homophobia and my colleague Jack Turbin, you guys should also follow him. He does a lot of transgender health and he's brilliant. So when I started, I was under a pseudonym and it gave me a way to start speaking up about things. And then Jessica knows, I actually reached out to her when I left MGH and then started at UCSF. I was like, I think it's time to maybe be myself. And she's like, yeah, you've towed that line really well of like popping off about things, but being respectful. And so then I started like using my own real name and it was just validating. And my own program has actually found me. And one of my program directors was like, oh, I've seen your Twitter. I was like, oh no. And she was like, no, I appreciate you being brave and speaking up. And so I think 10 years ago, that would not have happened. So gay med Twitter and med Twitter and like Black med Twitter are a way for people to find their community. What we actually did today was a couple months ago, we had a Zoom meeting and then Carl, who's on this talk, as well as Jessica and I talked about how everybody seemed pretty sad and like they felt like they were alone. And so we actually built a mentor-mentee match thing where like across different countries and continents and things like that, people actually, mentees were allowed to pick their mentors. And so everybody got like their first or second choice. And so we released the results of that today. And so I would have never envisioned that happening, but it gave us a way of actually uniting people across hospitals and across like the world.
Yeah.
So I think
it's a nice fix to this. Like we don't have time for everyone to hire a full-time staff and more faculty and more administration. And, you know, we need to start building this while we're waiting for schools to commit the resources. What I hear in this, and I want people in the audience, please chime in with your questions in these last couple minutes or any feedback you have or anxieties or challenges. But, you know, what I hear from all three of you was really also about, of course, we're all dying to read that essay when that person gets into school. Dean Salazar, they'll be able to sell it for $1 billion. But
right, it's a good one.
That's a good one. But what I'm struck by is that, you know, to be resilient, you have to have your stuff together. You have to have really been through it. You have to have probably been in therapy, as the psychiatrist would probably affirm, right? Like you have to have really talked about it. You have to have really healed. You know, I love the expression, speak from your scars and not your wounds. Right? So resiliency, right? It isn't about like getting hit and falling down, but it's about measuring the time it takes to bounce back, the ability to bounce back. So you really have to have been through it. And what I hear from all of you is that you have. that part of this, if you're not living boldly, as we started this talk by saying, how can we be more bold? How can we be more brave? And that the challenges and the benefits that that brings allows us to get all the way on to the other side of greater strength and greater resiliency. Thoughts, final thoughts, panelists.
I'll say one thing. I have mixed feelings about Twitter. Twitter stresses me out. I have a hard time with it. So I just shared my handle, but I don't tweet a whole lot because it just feels like it's this constant. Well, all social media is stressing me out these days. So I'm just going to put that out there. So it's okay if it stresses out the other folks that are listening. It's fine because it's so fast, and I feel like, wow, well, I've got to say something brilliant and smart. And anyway, that's my own imposter phenomenon sleeping in. But I think. You know, for me, one of the most important things again is being able to embrace our identities and really understand how important it is for each other, for this community, but also for our patients. And I'll also make a shameless plug for therapy. I think it's fantastic. Every physician should go to therapy. Every person, in my opinion, should go. I've got an amazing therapist that has also helped me kind of make the transition back to Texas as smooth as possible. So mental health, we have to normalize it. It's such a big part of everything we do. So yes, I will make that plug. I think, so just two final points. So on the day that I got that message about that patient firing me, I happened to go back in a clinic, and the last visit of that morning was the mother of a son who had been trying to find a provider, who turns out her son is gay and he's on the spectrum. And anyway, at the end of the day, she asked me if I'd be his doctor, right? And so because she connected with me, she was like, so it was in that moment that I realized this is a crazy job and it's such a roller coaster. But that's when I knew, and I've always known, but that's why I'm here in this space doing this work. And since then, he and I have seen each other a few times, and we've been able to connect in ways that he'd been lacking with other providers. And so those are the moments that I embrace and hold on tightly to, because, you know, sometimes it feels like they're far and few between. So you've got to, you know, hold on to those moments. And I think just having a chance like this to talk, and, you know, thinking about where I was when I graduated from San Antonio in '99, it's been a while since I've been out, but it's just great to see how the communities come together and take advantage of the silver lining and the Zoom. We're here, there's a community of us out there. And so the more that we can come together and have spaces like this, the better. And please reach out. You know, I think that's the other part of this, is knowing that even if you feel you're in a space where there's not a lot of other folks around to support you, that's what makes it special, right? There's this larger community that's here for each other. And so I want to make sure for the learners, the young learners on this call or on this video conference, that there's this incredible community of folks who are here to support you and make sure that you aren't walking down this path by yourself.
Thank you so much. All of you, thank you so much for coming here. And I just want to also just say to like what Chase was saying, it has not been easy. It's not easy for anybody. You should all be proud of yourselves. And it's because there's no rule book of how to come out and how to even figure out your own identity. And it's challenging for us all. But you guys are going to be the ones leading in healthcare soon. I think most of you are probably med students or residents, or maybe some other members of that academics, but I'm just really happy you guys were all here. And just know that you will have a voice, even if you're not in academics. Just as a doctor, you're an important person in the community. You can influence your patients, be a positive impact in so many ways. So don't forget that you will have that power. And also caring for LGBT individuals, like Renee was just saying, at the VA, I don't have that many, but I have 2 trans patients, and I feel like they weren't getting very good care, and just to be able to provide them that trans-affirming care and help them. And yes, the VA does provide hormones to trans veterans. It's not that bad. The federal government's not that bad. It's a real privilege and honor, and it's one of the most satisfying parts I find of being a primary care doctor. So I think I was going to try to say something else, but I can't remember. Oh yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, but all I do is like retweet Star Trek actors and journalists. But feel free to email me. I can put it in the chat if you guys ever want to talk. Or if you're interested in the internal medicine residency program at Dell Medical School, you can email me too.
Yeah, I would just say you all have an identity, and it's beautiful. And you being yourself will help other people be themselves. That's what I would say. So I wouldn't be here if I hadn't been myself and found Jessica and found all these other wonderful panelists and things like that. So thank you for doing this.
I just want to wrap this up by thanking our panelists, all three of you, for being so bold and brave in your lives and on this hour that we had together. I know that it's been a really rough week and months and eons, and having this hour together has really, I know, been wonderful for me. I love that we ended on thinking about patients and thinking about patient care, and that's really what this is all about. And I'll just sort of end as a thank you. I'm the non-clinical person here on behalf of patients. I just want to thank you all for the work that you do, and I want to thank you for looking out for us, looking out for our clues when we might not be able to say it. Making space and just helping us live long, happy, healthy lives. So with that, I will turn it back over. Any questions? I think our UT people are here. Yes, great.